All right, so welcome along, team. Thanks very much for joining me for this is my second round of this masterclass now. I did this already yesterday, which was probably more of a practice than anything. Hopefully it's a little bit more refined today, but well done for jumping in. So today I want to talk about something called what I call the calorie deficit paradox. Most of you have probably heard of the term calorie deficit by now, popularized mostly by James Smith. And whilst there's some truth in it, there's a lot of holes in it, which I hope to fill those holes today and give you a little bit more power and a little bit more knowledge so that you can control your weight loss journey for yourself. So I'm going to be doing a fair amount of talking over the next 90 minutes, but it would be great if I wasn't the only one here talking. So do jump in on the group chat today. There'll be a few questions that I'll be throwing at you. So make sure you can get to the group chat and answer those questions. And also, if you have any questions of your own, do fire them from me and I'll try and answer them as we go. Also, just offended by strong language, because I do sometimes occasionally drop the occasional F-bomb, which we will get straight into straight away, because my goal today, my mission today, is to help every one of you unfuck your relationship with food, take control of your health, your habits and your happiness, so you can finally have the body and the life that you want. Because I think a lot of us are ruled and controlled by food rather than us ruling and controlling our food. And that in turn ends up affecting our body and affecting our mood and our relationships with our bodies and our food. So whilst I start talking at you, please jump in on the group chat. Let me know whereabouts you're joining from and what is your goal? What is your fitness goal? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to build muscle? Is it a bit of both? And if you have any specific questions that you are hoping to get answered today, and I'll try and make sure that I get to those as well as we go along. Hopefully a lot of these questions will be answered in the course of the masterclass anyway. But if there's anything that I haven't covered, then I hope you can bring it to my attention. Welcome to Anthony, who's joining from London, but he's in Derbyshire right now, looking for advice on being more healthy after also being in addiction. And 98 days clean. Congratulations, Anthony. It was great chatting to you the other day as well about your journey. And well done for staying strong with your abstinence. Okay, so a quick bit about me. I know some of you already know this because some of us have been working together already. So my name's Ali Fitz. I own and operate AF Fitness, Ali Fitz Fitness, but I haven't always done that. I used to work in the film industry. You can see that picture bottom left with that explosion going off behind my head. That's because I used to work in the film industry as a special effects engineer. I trained for 3 years at university, and it's the job I wanted to do all the time growing up. I wanted to be on film sets, blowing things up and flipping cars, and I made it. I got to my dream job. But to be honest, I absolutely hated it. I felt like I was working for a massive corporation. I was a small cog in a big machine. And I felt like I was spending my whole day spending a lot of Disney's money to basically send things to landfill and send things up in smoke. And so I was very miserable. And in my spare time, my little bit of salvation was to run a free boot camp, which I ran in Clapham Common in London every Saturday and Sunday morning. And over the years, it grew to around 50 people every session running around the park with me for free. I just ran that as a hobby to keep me sane at the weekends when I wasn't on film sets. And then whilst I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I was fortunate to be approached by a woman who worked in America for a fitness startup called OpenFit, which is a fitness app that broadcasted live classes around the world. And they hired me pretty much on the spot when I was at my boot camp. And I started working for them for a number of years, which was amazing. But unfortunately, as it was a startup, as many startups do, it ended up folding just after COVID. And so I started working at an F45 studio, because at this point I'd left the film industry. So I was coaching classes in person in an F45 studio. And at the same time started to build my own business, which is where we are now. And you'll see I've had a fitness journey of my own as well. Fortunately, I've never been particularly overweight, but I also was never particularly strong or muscly. I didn't really have the body that I wanted. And so in my 20s, having grown up as the kind of science nerd kid at school and being into my art and my science and very much not the sporty kid, always last to be picked for the team in PE, I finally decided to start doing some exercise in my 20s. And it was throughout my 20s that I got to where I am now with my body and with my health where I want to be. And over the years, I've had 15 years of fitness experience, helped over 500 clients transform their bodies, both through my own business and through other businesses, and well over 1,000. I couldn't even count the number of hours that I've spent coaching. So what we're covering today is the problem, what I call the calorie deficit paradox, understanding how we got to that problem, the false solutions that are sold to you, and then what I call the KSS framework, which is the framework that I work under, that I work with my clients, and then how to implement that so that you can succeed with your health and fitness long term. So number one, the problem. Who here, jumping on the group chat, who here feels like they have more body fat than they want? Don't be shy. I think most of us are probably here for the same reason. Jump into the group chat. Just say me if you feel like you currently have more body fat than you want, or give you a hand up if you know how to do the wavy emoji thing on the Zoom. I know Anthony does because we chatted recently. Louise does. Janelle does. Rebecca does. Yeah, so I think most of us are here for the same reason. Rachel hasn't said anything, but I've been working with Rachel for a number of years, and I think now we'll learn a little bit about Rachel later on. Surprise, Rachel, you make an appearance here. So how do we actually quantify that? Because it's very easy for us to all feel like we are overweight or feel like we have wobbly bits where we don't want wobbly bits. So it's important to actually get some kind of objective data on that, rather than us just subjectively looking in the mirror or pinching rolls of fat and thinking, yeah, I've got too much fat. So there's a number of ways we measure that. The most common way is with something called the body mass index, or BMI. This kind of gives you a number based on a scale, and that number simply comes from two data points. It comes from your height and it comes from your weight. And based on a formula that sort of multiplies those numbers together, it tells you, it outputs a number between 18.5 and above. And based on that number, it tells you whether you're in a healthy range, an underweight range, an overweight range. There is a big problem with the BMI scale, and I've already mentioned it. It's the fact that it only uses two data points. It uses your height and it uses your weight. It doesn't take into account your gender. It doesn't take into account your body composition. So it doesn't know how much muscle you have. It doesn't know how much fat you have. And obviously all these things in our body, our muscles, our bones, our water, these things all have weight to them as well. So if you're someone who has a lot of muscle, when you multiply your weight by your height, it can end up giving you a very high body mass index, which would suggest that you're overweight, but realistically, you may be just very muscly. So there's a big problem with the body mass index, but a lot of people, especially doctors, will decide whether you are overweight or healthy based on just your body mass index alone, which isn't a very good or accurate way of objectively deciding that. Fortunately, we have other ways. So we can look at body fat percentage. So body fat percentage, it literally looks at how much of your weight as a percentage is fat and what percent of your weight is fat. And based on your age and the range that you're in, we can get an idea whether you're a healthy range or not. The average body fat for adult females between 20 and 40, the average body fat should be between 25 to 31%. Going over that would suggest that you're overweight or have too much body fat. Going below that, we go through a couple of ranges, a kind of fitness range and then an athlete range. Athletes aged between 20 and 40 could have body fat as low as 14 to 20%. And then any female under 13% would be considered very low body fat, to the point where it's just the essential fat that you've got in your body. So the fat that you need to basically stay alive, that would basically be considered underweight. Generally, we want to be looking as women, between 20 to 30. And for men, the number is a little bit lower. Men tend to hold less body fat. We don't need as much body fat. So for men, the essential amount of body fat for 20 to 40-year-olds is 2 to 5%. That would be considered underweight. Athletes may fall between 6 to 13%. And then fitness to average people should be looking somewhere between 14 to 24%. So those are the body fat percentages. The thing with body fat percentage is the only way to accurately measure it is using something called a DEXA scan, which is a machine that really only universities or healthcare professionals have access to. So it's not something you can just go to your doctor and say, can I get a DEXA scan? You generally need to go to a university specializing in sports science, or you need to go to a specialist clinic in order to get a DEXA scan. But we can often look at photographs of ourselves in order to get a sense of our body fat. And you can also use things like in-body scanners. A lot of gyms have these scanners where you stand on the scales and then you hold some handles and you stand on it with bare feet, and it will send electrical pulses through your body to try and get a sense of your body fat percentage. Again, not super accurate, but it's better than nothing. And it's certainly better than the body mass index scale. So don't use the body mass index scale. Try to get a reading of your body fat percentage. If you are concerned you might be overweight, you can use that as a more objective way to decide that, rather than just pinching your belly and thinking, oh, I need to lose weight. All right. So in numbers, how many what percentage of the UK population, I think everyone that we've got joining us today is in the UK, what percentage of the UK population do we think is overweight? And what percentage of the UK population do we think is even higher than that and obese? So obese is, overweight is anyone who is above the healthy range, and obese is anyone who is even higher than that, above 30 on the body mass index. I will mention that these numbers again are based on body mass index, not body fat. So these numbers may be inflated by people who are particularly muscly. Jumping on the group chat, as a percentage, what percentage of Brits do we think are overweight? What percentage of Brits do we think are obese? Fastest finger first. Who's going to be there? Who's going to get them? And welcome to those of you who are joining on Instagram Live. If you do want to join the call, you just head to alifits.com, alifits.com/live-event, and you can join this call on Zoom. All right, Anthony, he's good. Anthony's been doing his research. So yeah, the UK obesity rate is 30%. So a third of the British population is obese. So that means not just above the healthy range, but even above the overweight range. 2/3 of the British population are overweight, which means only 1/3 of British adults are in a healthy range, and 2/3 overweight, and 1/3 obese. So it is a real problem. Worldwide, we have 1 billion obese people in the world, and 2.5 billion people are in the overweight category out of a population of 8 billion. So it's a real problem. And so the advice that we generally hear is move more and eat less, because what really matters when it comes to losing weight is calorie deficit. So who would agree that we need to be eating less as a population in general? Who would agree that we have an obesity problem, an overweight problem, and so we need, as a global population, to be eating less? Who would agree with that? Say me, or say yes in the group chat if you agree with that statement. A lot of quiet participants in the chat today.
I agree.
You agree. Anthony agrees. Thanks very much,
Yeah.
mate. That's all right, man. Thanks very much. Cool. So we have a couple of mixed answers there, because I know that some of you have been working with me for a while, my stance on this, and you've learned lots of this stuff for yourself now. So before we move on, I would like to just state for the record that I understand what a calorie deficit is, and I would therefore agree the only way for us to lose weight is to be in a calorie deficit. So that might seem like it goes at odds with the title of this masterclass. In order to lose weight, we do have to be in a calorie deficit. There's no way around that. So it's important that we understand what a calorie deficit is. Thanks, Rebecca. All good. So just say in the group chat if you are familiar with what calorie deficit actually means. And if you don't, you can say no need to be shy here. We're all here to learn. So if you don't know what calorie deficit is, stick it in the group chat. I'm going to explain it either way. All right. So it might just dictate how in-depth I go into it. All right. Cheers, Anthony. To understand what a calorie deficit is, we first need to understand what calories are. So we hear about calories a lot. Calories are simply a unit of measurement for energy. So we know that when we exercise, we burn energy. We know that when we eat food, we are consuming energy. And calories are just a measurement of energy, in the same way a centimeter is a measurement of distance and a liter is a measurement of volume or liquid. Calories are just a measurement of energy. So we can take energy into our bodies through food, and we can expend energy through exercise and moving and thinking. Our brain uses a lot of energy, and generating heat, and even digesting our food uses some energy. So we take calories in, we take energy in through food, and we expend energy through all sorts of things, particularly movement and exercise. But actually, our body uses a lot of energy just existing. That's what we would call our basal metabolic rate, our BMR. Our body uses the majority of its energy, burns the majority of calories just from existing, from our heart beating, pumping blood around, from our breathing, from repairing cell structures within our body, uses a lot of energy. Now, the amount of energy that we burn in a day, the amount of energy we expend, the amount of calories we expend throughout a day, if we add that all together, our BMR, the amount of energy we expend exercising, the amount of energy we expend moving around, if we add all of those calories together, we get what we call our total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE. All right, so our TDEE is the total amount of energy our body burns in a day. And if we eat that same number of calories, so if the same amount of calories goes into our body as the amount we're expending, then that would be called eating maintenance calories. We're eating the same amount of calories in as is going out. That is our maintenance calories. All right. Once we know that, we can then understand what deficit and surplus is. If we start to eat more calories than we are expending, so if we start to eat above our TDE or above our maintenance, then we end up in what's called a calorie surplus, which means we are taking more energy in and we're not burning it all, which then means we start to store that extra energy. We store those extra calories as predominantly body fat. So we start to store that energy for later, for a time when maybe we're not eating as much. Now, if we go to the other end of the scale, where we're consuming less energy than we are burning, so we're taking fewer calories into our body, but we're burning more because we're being very active, etc., then we are now in a calorie deficit. There's less energy going in and there's more energy going out. And in that scenario, our body starts to use that energy that it stored earlier, that energy that our body stored as fat, we start to use it to make up the difference between the small amount that we're taking in and the large amount that's going out. And we fill that gap by burning body fat. And that is why being in a calorie deficit achieves weight loss, all right? It is important to understand as well that our body is very clever and it adapts a bit. So if we eat more calories, our body will also burn a bit more calories. It will use more calories because there's more available. And if we are eating fewer calories, our body will also burn a bit less calories as well to adapt and try and be more frugal with the few calories it's getting. So our body will adapt a little bit, but ultimately to lose weight, we do have to be in a calorie deficit. Now, the problem I have with the calorie deficit, oh, by the way, if you want to find out what your TDE is, if you want to find out what your maintenance calories are, or what deficit you should be in to lose weight, there's a number of different ways you can do that. There's all sorts of free online tools. I created one myself, which I put a lot of time and energy in because I felt like a lot of the ones that were available weren't very good. So I spent a lot of time producing a free calorie and macro calculator that will calculate your TDEE pretty accurately. And you can get that at alifits.com/calculator. So take a screenshot of that and feel free to have a go with it later. But the problem I have with this calorie deficit advice is a lot of the time you hear coaches that want to try and sell you into their program. They want to sell you the dream. You'll hear them saying, just eat what you want and lose weight, or keep eating the foods that you love and lose weight, which generally means you can still eat the same shit that you love. You just need to eat a bit less of it. And there's a big problem with that mentality, all right? Because if you start tracking your calories, ultimately, if you burn 2,000 calories per day, if your maintenance calories is 2,000 calories per day, all you need to do to lose weight is eat fewer calories than that. So you could have 1,500 calories. If you're burning 2,000, you could eat 1,500. Obviously, then there's a 500 calorie deficit. It's a pretty good place to be. You could eat 500 calories less. And all of those 1,500 calories could come from ice cream and donuts and chocolate. You would still be in a deficit. You would still lose weight, all right? But there's a big problem with this. If all of your calories, if all your 1,500 calories are coming from chocolate and ice cream and general shit, then the problem is you are then not getting all the things your body needs. Quick show of hands. Who takes any forms of supplements? I'm not demonizing supplements here, by the way. I take a number of supplements myself, but jumping on the group chat, who takes supplements and what do you take? Obviously, if you prefer not to share that publicly, then that's fine. If you prefer to keep your supplements secret, but just let me know, do you take anything? Anthony says he doesn't. Rachel says she takes fiber supplements. Rachel takes vitamin D as well. Okay, magnesium for Janelle. All right, so here's the issue I have with the current calorie deficit advice that we often see online from fitness coaches, etc., is we get the nutrients we need from food, right? Food contains nutrients. Supplements didn't exist 200 years ago. So if food contains nutrients and we're all overeating so much, right? We're generally as a population, we are overweight, so we must be eating too much. So food contains nutrients. We're eating too much food. Why do we need supplements? Why have we not got enough nutrients in our diet if we're eating so much food? It's fair to say that we are overfed but undernourished. We're getting plenty of food, but we're not getting plenty of nutrients. So the reason for that is exactly the reason that I have a problem with a lot of calorie deficit advice on the internet, which is if you're eating shit, your diet is already low in nutrients. Chocolate, ice cream, donuts, cakes, they don't have a lot of nutrients. So if you're getting most of your calories from these sorts of foods, you're probably already quite low in nutrients. So eating smaller portions of that same food, rather than eating 2,000 calories of donuts, now you're only eating 1,500 calories of donuts, you're still eating the same shit, but you're just getting smaller portions of it, which means you're getting even fewer calories from the nutrient devoid food that you're already having. So if calorie deficit is all that matters, clearly it's going to lead us to a situation where, okay, we might be losing weight, but we're also causing our bodies to be low in nutrients. So the calorie deficit paradox, as I see it, is eating less means you're not just eating fewer calories, you're also eating fewer protein, fiber, micronutrients, and food volume, which means you end up low in nutrients, you end up fatigued, you end up hungry, you end up having cravings, you end up ultimately relapsing because the diet that you're on isn't providing your body with the nutrients it needs. And so sooner or later, you're going to end up cracking and end up overeating again. All right, so we understand now what a calorie deficit is. We understand the problem with the calorie deficit advice, although there is definitely a strong thread of truth in it. So let's understand how we ended up in this problem, because the other issue I have with calorie deficit advice is that it doesn't explain why we are overweight in the first place. It understands how to fix the problem. It explains how to lose the weight, but it doesn't explain why we were overweight in the first place. Why are we in a calorie surplus? Why do we keep overeating? So let's have a look at it. First of all, it's important to understand you are not broken. The reason you are overeating is not because there's necessarily something wrong with you. It's not because you're, oh, why is my screen sharing pause? Let me just go back to that. Don't know what happened there. Can you see my screen all right? Just give me a thumbs up there, Anthony, if you can see my screen. Yeah, cool, thanks. Okay, you're not broken. There is a reason why we are overeating, and it's to do with our evolution. So in order to understand that, we need to have a look at what happened with our ancestors' food environment, what was going on as we were evolving. So our ancestors lived in an environment where most food didn't have a lot of calories in it. Most food was very high in fiber, high in water, low in fat, low in sugar. And because all the food that our ancestors was getting access to was low calorie density, it meant it was hard for our bodies to overeat in the same way we can today. There was a lot of effort and risk required to get food. So you had to climb mountains and climb trees and dig in through the ground in order to find the fruit and vegetables you wanted. If you wanted to eat meat, you needed to go and hunt the animals and catch them and chase them down. They weren't just conveniently held in pens in factory farms like they are now. They were roaming freely. You had to go and catch them. There was no refrigeration, so you wouldn't go and hunt more meat than you had access, than you were able to actually eat, because it would just end up going off. If you caught more than you could eat, by the next day it would all have been spoiled and covered in flies. So you wouldn't hunt more than you could eat, you wouldn't gather more than you could eat. And we had unpredictable food availability. So sometimes food was very scarce. We'd have famines where diseases would wipe out crops, or bad weather would cause crops to fail, or animals would migrate, or they wouldn't breed, and so there wouldn't be as much access to food, and therefore we would go through long periods of time where we just wouldn't have access to food in the way we do now. So we evolved, we adapted to that environment. For a start, we adapted to store fat. So the fact that we store fat on our bodies is not a mistake. The fact that we store extra calories is an evolutionary advantage, or it was an evolutionary advantage, because if we couldn't always get access to food, we needed to make sure that when we could get access to it, our body would store any additional calories that we weren't needing right now. We needed to make sure we stored it for when we did need it. Anthony says, I guess we're like all animals thousands of years ago. Yeah, exactly. In many ways, we are still like all animals. We just like to dress a bit smarter. So we would store energy. We evolved a method of storing calories for later. We also adapted so we could conserve energy. So when we had less access to food, when food was scarce, our metabolisms would slow down so that we were burning less energy. We also developed hormones that would make us crave certain foods. So foods that were very high in energy, so things that are high in fat, things that are high in sugar, we evolved to crave those foods much more because they would give us energy much more. So we developed a reward system called dopamine. You might have heard the word dopamine thrown around. This is a hormone that is responsible for addiction. So anyone who has suffered with drug addiction or alcohol addiction, it's down to that dopamine pathway where we eat those things, or we drink those things, or we take those substances, and it rushes dopamine into our system, and it makes us feel good. It makes us feel accomplished, makes us feel like we've achieved something. That is working on a hormone that evolved with a really good intention, which is to make us go out and hunt or go out and find honey or go out and find fruits that are high in sugar in order to make us do those hard things in order to achieve the goal. Problem is, nowadays, we get that dopamine from doing very simple things like taking drugs, like using porn, like using social media, and like eating high-calorie foods. We still get dopamine from those high-calorie foods. Problem is, we don't have to do hard things to get them. So that's the real problem, is dopamine is driving us to have those things, even though there's no effort required to get them. There's also a hormone called ghrelin, which is involved in making us feel hungry, and it intensifies the more our calorie intake drops. So if you are in a calorie deficit for a long time, you have to get comfortable with that ghrelin hormone, often referred to as ghrelin the gremlin, because it's constantly there reminding you that you're a bit hungry, and it intensifies the more of a calorie deficit you're in. So therefore, it's sensible when you are in a calorie deficit not to be in too much of a deficit. Otherwise, that ghrelin gets pretty noisy. And that gives us a feeling that we're never done eating, all right? So as I mentioned, you're not broken. This is all part of your evolutionary adaptation. Problem is, the environment that we're in now is nothing like our ancestors. We used to hunt and gather for our food. Now it gets delivered to our door. We used to find it difficult to find food high in calories. It was all low calorie density food. Now it's ultra processed, hyper palatable, full of calories. We never used to have refrigeration, so we had to only catch what we could eat. Now we have cupboards that are always full. We can refrigerate our food so that we can always purchase more food than we need right now. Food used to be scarce and unpredictable. Now it's available 24/7. It's cheap, it's convenient. And also in nature, the combination of high fat and high sugar in one food type used to be very rare. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. Now it's very common. So foods that contain a lot of fat and a lot of sugar, we didn't really find that. Sometimes we'd find foods that were high in fat, like seeds and nuts and avocados, high in fat, very little sugar. And we'd find some foods that were high in sugar, like honey and fruits, but they didn't contain any fat. Now we get both those things in one food type, which is very addictive, and we'll talk about that later. So the other big problem is now we're a little bit entitled, okay? I think I speak for everyone when I say now we expect that to be the norm. We expect to have food available to us all the time. Quick show of hands in the group chat. Who has ever gone a full day without eating? I know one or two of you have experimented with intermittent fasting, but who's ever gone a full day without eating by accident? Who's ever gone a whole day of eating, not because they're intermittent fasting, but because that's just the way the cards landed? I'm going to carry on because I've got a feeling no one's going to say yes to that one. So whereas that used to happen regularly to our ancestors. Okay, thanks, Anthony. I appreciate that. He said yes, but mostly down to addiction. So yeah, I think most people haven't ever gone through a whole day without eating. And we expect that to be the case, even though our ancestors regularly had to face drought or go days where their hunt didn't come through, was not fruitful. A lot of us eat sweet foods or desserts most days. We think after dinner, I've got to have something sweet. I've got to have a sweet treat after dinner, whether that's a bit of chocolate or whether that's a pudding. Or maybe it's a coffee that's full of vanilla syrup and a big swirl of cream on top. A lot of us have a milky coffee every day at work or on the way to work. We might go and buy a vanilla spiced whipped cream marshmallow latte on the way to work. And most of us expect to have a different variety of food available to us every day. We now live in a global economy where food is shipped every corner of the globe. We used to only have access to the food that was immediately available within a certain vicinity, however far we were able to walk that day. But now we expect to have a huge variety of different foods available to us. So we're a little bit entitled, and our biology never prepared us for that. It never prepared us for the abundance of different foods, and it never prepared us for the calorie density of those foods. So this is how we ended up in the problem. And it's important to understand that right now the odds are stacked against you. Your biology is stacked against you because the environment has changed much faster than your evolution can keep up. And so your biology is stacked against you and your environment is stacked against you. And so lots of fitness influencers, companies, supplement companies, they're all vying for your money to try and solve that solution for you. And so you're being sold a number of different solutions. A big one, as I've already mentioned, is influencer diets, whether that's influence on social media or people trying to sell their books on TV, where they say you can eat what you love and still lose weight. All you need to do is be in a calorie deficit. Keep on eating crap just as long as you eat smaller quantities of crap. The big problem with this is, as we've already discovered, that can then put us in a nutrient deficit where, yes, we're getting fewer calories, but we're also getting fewer of the vitamins, minerals, fiber, supplements. So vitamins, fiber, protein, those things that our body still needs. So influencer diets trying to tell you that you can still eat the same crap that you love and still lose weight. It's true, but for how long? How long can you keep doing that? Cutting carbohydrates is another one that kind of comes a little bit more from the influencer world, but it's also popularized by the Atkins diet and the ketogenic diet. And cutting carbs, again, it can be very effective because when you cut carbohydrates for long enough, you force your body to have to use fats for energy. You put your body into a state called ketosis, where your body starts to metabolize fat into energy instead. But your body needs carbohydrates. It's what your brain uses as its primary fuel. And also carbohydrates tend to come from vegetables. And vegetables is where a lot of the most nutrient dense, where the vitamins and the minerals that your body needs, that's where they tend to come from. So if you cut carbs, again, you might lose some weight, but you're going to end up putting yourself in a nutrient deficit. Most of all, probably fiber, because fiber is a carbohydrate. So if you're not eating carbohydrates, you're probably not getting enough fiber. We'll talk more about fiber later. GLP-1 medications, this is a really big topic now. You might have heard of Ozempic or Wegovy or Mounjaro. Those are the kind of three big brand names of GLP-1 medications. Now, it's important to understand, I'm not demonizing GLP-1s here because they are a little bit of a miracle drug. GLP-1 is a hormone that your body produces. It's a satiety hormone, so it makes you feel satiated, it makes you feel full up. So when your body releases GLP-1 naturally, it makes you not want to eat. And now we have synthesized that hormone into these drugs like Ozempic and Mounjaro. So when you inject yourself with those medications, it means your appetite falls through the floor. And that's really helpful for people that struggle to keep the weight off because they're constantly wanting to eat. Imagine if you could just turn that off and you don't want to eat anymore. That's great in theory. But again, if you have a really low appetite, the chances are the things that you still do want to eat are the things that are driven by addiction rather than driven by necessity, like the nutrients that you need. So you probably find, even if you have a very low appetite because of the GLP-1, you can probably still smash a bit of chocolate. You can probably still smash a bit of ice cream, or these foods that don't have much nutrients but have a big dopamine spike. All right, so GLP-1, amazing for dropping your appetite and therefore amazing for calorie deficit, but very bad for nutrient deficit. And therefore, the foods that tend to satiate the most, like protein and fiber, those are the things you tend to eat the least of when you're on GLP medication. And therefore, you can end up losing muscle mass because you need protein to maintain muscle. And you can end up with all sorts of digestive issues because you need fiber to keep a healthy digestive system. So GLP-1 medications, absolute groundbreaking, life-saving drug. However, you need the education around your food to make sure that if you do go on those medications, you are then eating better, not just eating less. All right. And this is why the calorie deficit advice is broken, because if all you care about is getting in a calorie deficit, GLP-1s will help you with that, but they may cause other issues. Intermittent fasting. This is a tool that I use quite a lot with my clients, and it's a tool that I often use myself as well. But again, intermittent fasting is just a way of restricting the amount that you eat because it restricts the amount of time that you can eat. And if you restrict the amount of time, chances are you're going to eat less within that time. But again, it's creating a calorie deficit without creating any rules or boundaries around what you should be eating and what you shouldn't. So again, you could end up eating the same crap just over a shorter amount of time. Gastric bans, very similar to GLP-1 medications. They restrict your appetite and they also restrict your body's ability to absorb nutrients because it reduces the amount of space to absorb. And so similar issues to GLP-1. It makes you less hungry, but you probably can still eat shit if you want to. And then basic calorie counting. Now I use okay, Louise, thanks very much for joining. Basic calorie counting, again, this can work and it is the foundation of a lot of the nutrition teaching that I do with my clients. Counting your calories is really important to make sure that you are in a calorie deficit. But if all you do is count the amount of energy going in, count the amount of calories going in, again, you can still eat shit as long as you don't eat too much calories of shit. All right. So we do need to make sure that we are doing a little bit more than just cutting our calories and eating less. So the KSS framework, this is the framework under which I try to help my clients eat better and not just eat less. And this is the big part that I think a lot of influencers and a lot of fitness and health marketing misses out on. So The KSS framework, the solution is essentially calories determine weight change. We can't deny that. Calorie deficit determines your weight change, but the systems determine the calories. And the KSS framework is designed to put those systems in place. If you fix the system, the results will take care of themselves. So we don't need help eating less, we need help eating right. And this is where my KSS system comes in. KSS stands for knowledge, skills, and systems. Through my program, I try to help my clients get the knowledge to eat better, develop the skills to implement that knowledge, and then develop the systems to adhere to the knowledge and skills. Because it's all well and good having the knowledge and skills, but if you don't actually adhere to them, then it's not going to work very long. Sorry about the typo there, it says KSE at the top, but we know what we're talking about. Okay, knowledge. I'm going to go through all of these topics in a little bit more detail. We've already talked about calorie balance and total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE. If you missed any of that, either catch up on the recording or just say something in the group chat and I'll give you a very brief reminder. But we also need to look at macros, glycemic index, cooking methods and how they affect the glycemic index. We need to take a deep dive on sugar, fiber, food processing, satiety, protein and fiber paradox. This is another mini paradox that I'll touch on. Liquid calories and alcohol. We're not going to talk a lot about alcohol today, but I will briefly touch on it just to make sure we understand the basic importance of it. And then moving more, again, we're not going to talk a lot today about activity. We're going to focus more about calories in rather than looking too much on the calories outside of things, but moving more versus eating less. And then also how muscle affects all of this as well. So again, we're not going to talk a huge amount about exercise, but it is important to touch on it. So firstly, the 3 macronutrients. I should have asked you guys before showing this, because opportunity for you guys to show how smart you all are, because I know you probably know what the 3 macronutrients are. We've got carbohydrates, fats, and protein. And it's important to understand that those 3 macronutrients, carbs, fats, and protein, they all contain different amounts of calories. And so if what we're looking at is the amount of calories going into our system, we need to know that certain macros will put more calories into our system, other macros will put less calories into our system. But we also need to understand that each macro has a different role within the body. So it's not just about how many calories they're putting in, it's about what functions they provide to our body. So starting with carbohydrates, it's often the most demonized one. People often talk about cutting carbs in order to lose weight. And the reason for that really is the primary function of carbohydrates is it provides our provides our body with energy. It is the primary energy source that our body likes to use. Our brain runs almost exclusively off carbohydrates. So therefore, if we're like, oh, I'm eating too much energy compared to what I'm burning, I need to be in an energy deficit, I need to be in a calorie deficit, then I'd need to reduce the amount of carbohydrates I'm eating. The problem is, carbohydrates also contain the majority of the fiber that we eat. Fiber is itself a carbohydrate. It's just a specific type of carbohydrate that we can't digest, and therefore it gives us 0 calories, which in the case of, for many reasons, is a good thing. The more fiber, the more carbohydrates that we get from fiber, the better, because it's reducing the amount of calories we're absorbing. But we also need to understand that at the other end of the scale, we have sugar, which is also a type of carbohydrate, and sugar tends to be more detrimental to us for a number of reasons that we'll talk about a bit later. All right, so carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram, except for fiber. All right, so whether it's sugar or whether it's complex carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram. Then we have fats, which are more than double that. Now, fats are really important for hormone production, nerve function. Also, a number of different vitamins are only absorbed with fat. So vitamins like vitamin D, they're absorbed with fat. So we need to get enough fat in order to absorb them. However, we do need to be aware that fats have 9 calories per gram, so more than double the calorie density of carbohydrates. And then we have different types of fats. We have saturated fats, and that can be further divided. We're not going to go into that, but we have unsaturated fats, and then we have saturated fats. Again, both of those contain 9 calories per gram, but they come from different sources and they provide different functions. Saturated fat doesn't really benefit us. Eating too much saturated fat can increase your LDL cholesterol, which is a bad type of cholesterol in your body that can end up causing sclerosis, etc. Saturated fats we want to eat, we want to control how much we eat, tends to come from animal fats predominantly. So you need to watch your intake of fatty meats or fatty animal products like cheese, because they can raise your LDL cholesterol. On the other hand, we have unsaturated fats, which is involved in reducing your LDL cholesterol and raising your good cholesterol, which is called HDL. It's also worth noting that fiber helps with that process. So eating a good intake of fiber can help to reduce your LDL cholesterol as well. All right, so you do need fats, but you need to be getting the right type of fats and you need to be getting the right amount of it, 9 calories per gram. And then we have protein, which is back to 4 calories per gram, just like carbohydrates. It is the only macro that can be used for creating tissues. So if you want to try and repair or build muscle, you need to be getting enough protein, because we can't use carbohydrates or fats to build tissue. We can only use protein for that. And then we can further divide proteins as complete and incomplete. We're not going to go too much into this, but incomplete and complete proteins is to do with the amino acids that make up the protein. So protein is made up of amino acids. 9 of those amino acids are essential, meaning that we have to get them from our diet. Our body can't produce them. And complete proteins contain all 9 of those essential amino acids, whereas incomplete proteins may be missing 1 or more of the essential amino acids. So we need to make sure that we are getting all the amino acids, which you can either do from having complete proteins, which tends to come from animal protein or soy products, whereas incomplete proteins like beans and lentils and chickpeas and seeds, etc., they contain protein, they contain amino acids, but they might just be short in 1 or more of them. So you have to combine different types of those protein sources so that you fill in the gaps. All right, so you can get all your amino acids from incomplete sources, which tend to be plant-based. You just need to make sure you get a good variety of them in order to fill in the gaps. All right, macro targets, how much should we get? Actually, before I show that screen, can anyone tell me on the group chat how much protein you should be getting in your diet daily? So roughly what should be your protein target? And I will give you a tip. It is a range. So you could probably go with a wide range of numbers and still get this one correct. Love that. Janelle says 2 grams per weight. I will mention Janelle's one of my clients, and I'm pleased she's been paying attention. So well done, Janelle. Okay, so Janelle's got one of the right answers there with 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Rachel says 1.6 per kilogram of body weight, which is also a correct answer, as I say, it is a range. All right, so pivoting away from protein, can anyone tell me how much fiber we should be getting per day? This is quite a different number. Give you a little tip there. So can anyone tell me how much fiber we should be getting? Rachel says 30 grams. She smashed it. Rachel, another one of my clients here. Again, I'm really pleased to see. Wendy says 35, which actually isn't bad, because you can go a little bit either side of 30. And it depends as well based on your calorie intake. So I will give you a little bit more of a specific answer in a moment. So yeah, good from Wendy there, 35 grams. Okay, and then sugar finally. Can anyone tell me what is the limit on sugar that we should consume daily? And then Rachel says, unsure. Okay. I'll jump into it. I'll reveal all. So lots of numbers here. Feel free to take a screenshot if you can't remember all these. Generally we'll start on protein because that's where we started. So with protein, as I say, it's quite a big range. 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight is the absolute floor. So that's the minimum you should be getting. We can round that up to 1 gram, so just to make the math easy. So if you weigh 80 kilos, then you should be getting a minimum of about 80 grams of protein per day. That is the minimum. That's just to make sure that you're not calorie deficient. 80 grams for an 80 kilo person, 50 grams for a 50 kilo person, but that's the absolute minimum. As Janelle mentioned, 2 grams per kilogram of body weight is a better target. That is particularly if you are losing weight, all right? And I'll explain why. When we lose weight, generally we want to be losing body fat, right? We don't want to lose muscle. Does anyone here want to lose muscle? If you do, we can have a chat about that, or you might have your reasons. But generally, we don't want to be losing muscle. We want to be losing body fat. Now, the way that you maintain your muscle when you are in a calorie deficit is 2 things. Firstly, make sure you're lifting weights, because if you don't use it, you lose it. If you're not using your muscle is very expensive for your body to maintain. It uses a lot of energy, a lot of calories. So if your body isn't using those muscles, it thinks, right, let's save some energy, let's get rid of that muscle. So the way to maintain that muscle is to actually use those muscles as much as you can, lift weights, be active. That is the first way to signal to your body not to cut the muscle. And the second way is you've got to provide the building blocks to your body to actually maintain that muscle, which is protein. Although 1 gram of protein per kilogram is enough to be healthy, If you're in a calorie deficit, you need to go above that. You need to be aiming more for 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So that might mean if you are an 80 kilogram person, you need to be getting that 160 grams of protein per day, which sounds like a lot. It's definitely doable, and it is definitely in your interest. Rachel mentioned 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. That is a really good target if you are in a maintenance stage. So if you are not really trying to lose weight and you're not really trying to gain weight, then 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight is a really good target, but it wouldn't hurt you to go a bit higher than that. And if you're trying to pile on muscle, if you're trying to gain muscle, then somewhere between 1.6 to 2.2 is a good range. You don't want to be going below that. All right, but generally I would be going higher. Okay, so that's proteins covered. As a percentage of your calorie intake, if we were to look at a ratio of all the calories you consume within a day, I would say minimum 20% of your calories should come from protein. But if you are in a weight loss phase, going 30 plus is going to make that weight loss much easier. All right, so 30% of your calories from protein is going to be much more successful for you. Okay, I asked about fiber, and Rachel said 30 grams of fiber. That is pretty much spot on. It's roughly 14 grams per 1,000 calories. All right, so if you're consuming more than 1,000 calories, you probably need to be getting more than 30 grams of fiber. If you're consuming less than 1,000 grams, let me try that again. If you're consuming more than 2,000 calories, you should be getting more than 30 grams of fiber. If you're consuming less than 2,000 calories, you don't really want to drop your fiber too much below 30 grams of fiber, but you can do a bit. All right. And then sugar was the one that no one knew the answer to. How many grams of sugar should you be going for? To be honest, you don't really need sugar in your diet. So a limit of 30 grams of sugar per day is really what you should be aiming for. And we're going to talk a little bit more about sugar in a moment. Also looking at those percentages, 45 to 65% of your calories coming from carbohydrates, 25 to 35% of your calories coming from fats. And then I've already mentioned about protein. So it's going to depend on your goals really, on how you move those percentages around. All right, the role of insulin. This is really important stuff. This is going to have a big effect on your success with weight loss. Yes, the most important thing with weight loss is the calorie deficit, but how you influence your insulin response is going to make that much easier or much harder. Okay, so insulin is a hormone responsible for how your body deals with energy, in particular carbohydrates. It's worth understanding that every form of carbohydrate is essentially sugar in one form or another. So carbohydrates can either be complex carbohydrates, which means it's lots of sugar molecules all joined together, what we would call a polysaccharide. So when you take lots of sugar molecules and you join them together, that becomes a complex carbohydrate, which takes time for our body to absorb because our body has to break it back down into sugar before it can absorb it. Our body can only absorb carbohydrates in the form of sugar. So we eat complex carbs, our body has to break them down, and that takes time. It uses an enzyme called amylase, which you might remember from biology as a kid. Then we also have simple carbohydrates, i.e. sugar, which is where it's just one or two sugar molecules joined together. So it may just be one sugar molecule on its own, which our body can absorb straight away, or it may be two sugar molecules joined together called a disaccharide, which again breaks down very quickly. We can absorb it very quickly. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask you guys, how much sugar do you think should exist in our body at any one time? I'm going to stop my screen share real quick. So this 5-liter tub here represents the amount of represents the amount of blood in our body. This is actually a screen wash tub, but it is 5 liters. The average adult has 5 liters of blood in their body. I've also got a bag of sugar and a teaspoon. A teaspoon is roughly 5 grams of sugar. If I pick up a teaspoon of sugar here, that's 5 grams. How many teaspoons of sugar do I need to add to our blood to be in a normal, healthy range of sugar? How much? And I asked my clients this yesterday. Anthony says, I never understood liters and things like that. Okay, so that's what 5 liters looks like. If that was full to, obviously this is empty, so it doesn't splash everywhere. But if that was full of blood, that's roughly how much blood is in your body. And how many teaspoons of sugar do I need to add to our blood have a good, healthy amount of sugar in our blood. You need some sugar in your blood in order for your body to function. You need some carbohydrates. So how much do I need to add? Anyone on the group chat? Give us just a wild guess. Rachel says 10. Rebecca says 1 tablespoon could kill you. Wendy says 5. Okay, good guesses. I'll show you. So we're going to put the first teaspoon in there. Actually, some of that went on the floor, but imagining it all went in. So we've got the first teaspoon of sugar in there. That is how much sugar should be in your blood at a normal, healthy level. It goes upwards a little bit after a meal, and it can drop a little bit if you haven't eaten for a while. But 1 teaspoon in that whole 5 liters of blood is how much sugar should be in your blood at any one time. All right. Now, Rebecca said something interesting. She said 1 tablespoon could kill you. Yeah, Rebecca's not wrong. Well, over a sustained period, that's true. So if I added 1 more teaspoon, we would then be in a state called hyperglycemia, which is when there's too much sugar in our blood. Our body can come back from that. Our body can recover, but in that state, our body would have too much sugar and our body would need to start to remove some of that sugar from our blood because it would be too high. So how much sugar do you think I would need to add to our blood for it to be critical, for it to be fatal? How many teaspoons do you think? As I said, our body can recover from a certain range. So anyone want to have a guess how much sugar would need to be added to our blood for it to become fatal? I wish I had a prop for this, by the way. Have a guess, or guess in. So we know that 1 teaspoon is 5 grams. Then guess in grams if you prefer. All right, everyone's gone shy. So I'll tell you, 30 grams of sugar, which is equivalent to 6 teaspoons. So if I added 5 more teaspoons to this, if I added 6 teaspoons of sugar to our blood, we would then be in a life-threatening state, which is that much sugar. That's 6 teaspoons of sugar there, 30 grams. Anyone know how much sugar is in a can of Coke? In a single can of full-fat Coke? Anyone know how much sugar is in a single can of full-fat Coke? I'm just going to share my screen again. Everyone's gone quiet on me now. Can someone just give me a message on the group chat and let me know that you can still hear me? Okay, fine. Cool. All right. I need to get my chat back. Here it is. All right. Rebecca said 5 grams of sugar in a can of Coke. The answer is 30 grams. So that same amount of sugar that would kill you if it was added to your blood is the same amount that is in 1 can of full-fat Coke, 30 grams. Obviously, all of that sugar that comes from a can of Coke, firstly, it doesn't get straight into our bloodstream. It doesn't all suddenly appear in our bloodstream like that. But also, our body does have methods of regulating the amount of sugar in our bloodstream. And that's with the hormone called insulin. So insulin plays a really important role in making sure that we don't end up in a situation where 1 can of Coke ends up killing us, because insulin tells the cells in our body to absorb sugar out of the blood. All right. So if you drink a load of sugar or if you eat a load of carbohydrates and it starts to get into the bloodstream as sugar, insulin tells your body, right, we need to start pulling sugar out of the blood and doing something with it. The first thing our body wants to do is start to burn it. It tells us our body to move more. We may feel a little bit more fidgety. We might find that we feel more energized and more kind of fidgety. That's because our muscles now want to burn that energy. Insulin is telling our muscles to absorb the energy and do something with it. The next thing our body tries to do with it is to store that sugar as something else. Does anyone want to tell me what we store that sugar as if we're not burning it? Sorry to hear that your reception is terrible, Wendy, but I'm glad you're back. Janelle, oh yeah, nice. All right, so I've got quite a few of my clients on this call, which is very reassuring because they're all getting all of the answers correct, which is great. So yeah, so most people in this situation, when I'd say, if we don't burn sugar, what do we do with it? Most people say fat. We store it as fat. And that is true. But the good news is the first thing we do when we start to store sugar, because sugar is a carbohydrate, ideally our body doesn't really want to convert it into fat if it doesn't have to. So the first thing our body does is stores it as something called glycogen, which is a form of carbohydrate. So our body takes the sugar out of the blood and turns it into glycogen. which it stores in the liver and in the muscles. Janelle's got it as well. It says in the muscles. So we store some of those carbohydrates in the liver and in the muscles. Now, the problem is we can only store a certain amount of glycogen. Once our liver and muscles are full of glycogen, there's no more room at the end. We can't store any more. And if we're sat on the couch not doing anything, if we're not burning that energy, then we are forced to store that sugar as something else. And that is when our body starts to convert the sugar into fat, and we can store an unlimited amount of fats. So although we can store a finite amount of glycogen, your body can just keep storing more and more fat. So insulin tells our body there's too much sugar, either do something with it or store it as fat. Now, because insulin is telling your body that there's an excess of sugar available, there's lots of sugar to use, insulin also tells your body to stop burning fat. It says, right now we need to deal with the sugar issue. We can save burning fat for another day. Right now, let's create fat, let's not burn it. So if we are constantly putting lots of carbohydrates into our body, especially if we're constantly putting lots of sugar into our body, then we create this situation where insulin is always high, and insulin is always telling our body, create fat, don't burn it. All right. And that's why if you're eating a lot of sugar all the time, you are likely to not only gain weight, but you're going to find it very difficult to lose weight. So yes, calorie deficit is important for weight loss, but also the types of foods that you're eating are going to make that much easier or much harder. Okay, glycemic index. So we've talked about how carbohydrates have to get into your blood have to be turned into sugar first to get into your blood. And how quickly that happens can be measured on what we call the glycemic index. So we have foods that get into the bloodstream very slowly. They take a long time to turn into sugar, and they get into the bloodstream slowly, which means we don't get that big insulin spike. And those are what we would call low glycemic index foods. Something that's between 0 and 55 would be considered low glycemic index. Those are things that are really high in fiber, because fiber slows down the absorption. Those are foods that are predominantly complex carbohydrates, so those long molecules that our body has to break down. Then we look at medium GI foods, which are often complex carbohydrates as well, but either they're lower in fiber or they're just different types of carbohydrates that break down a bit faster. And then we have high glycemic index foods. These are the foods that get into our bloodstream really quickly. They cause our bloods to become saturated with sugar, which means that insulin has to kick in and do something about it. And so those are high glycemic index foods. And typically those are foods with very low fiber. So we're looking at processed carbohydrates where the fiber's been removed, like white bread and pastries. We're also looking at things that are very high in sugar because, as we mentioned, sugar is a small molecule that gets into the blood very quickly. So sugary snacks, soda or fizzy drinks, those get into the bloodstream very quickly. So it's high GI. But it's important to understand as well that even a low or medium GI food, depending on how we cook it, that can really affect its GI as well. So it's important to understand if you cook a complex carbohydrate for a long time at a high heat, some of those complex carbohydrates start to break down. The heat causes those complex carbohydrates to break down into simple carbohydrates. And if you're keeping food at high heat for a long time, there's more opportunity for that to happen. So if you are cooking food in the deep fat fryer or you're roasting it for a long time in the oven, you take your potato and you stick it in the oven with a load of oil for a number of hours, then that food is going to break down into simpler carbohydrates and it's going to increase the glycemic index. Whereas if you take that same potato and you stick it in the microwave or you stick it in a steamer, it's lower temperature, it's much faster, and therefore you're not going to break down as many of those long carbohydrates. So you're going to keep the glycemic index much lower. You're going to make it much slower to absorb. So deep fat frying, roasting, generally that is going to cause the glycemic index to rise much more. Baking, air frying, grilling. Rebecca said, I thought air frying was good. So air frying is better than deep fat frying. And that's why air frying has become very popular, because whereas people used to cook a lot of their foods either in a deep fat fryer, so they'd maybe make their chips in a deep fat fryer, and then they changed to cooking them in the oven, and then they changed to cooking it in an air fryer. Firstly, an air fryer is basically the same as putting it in the oven, but it's just much faster, all right? An air fryer, because it's a smaller contained unit with a fan, it cooks your food much quicker. So the good news is the food is spending less time at a high heat. So air frying is good for reducing the amount of cooking time, which is a good thing. And also, when you air fry, you generally don't use oil. And as we mentioned before, oil is a fat, so it contains 9 calories per gram. So if you're taking your carbohydrates, which are 4 calories per gram, and then you're adding a load of oil, which is 9 calories per gram, now you're making that a much higher calorie meal. Plus, if you're deep frying it or roasting it in the oven, you're going to cook it for a much longer time. Stick it in the air fryer without oil. You've reduced the calorie content by removing the oil, and you've reduced the cooking time by putting it in the air fryer. So it is better, but you're still cooking at a high heat. Compare that to boiling. Boiling is only ever going to be 100 degrees. That's the maximum you can boil something for, because after that point, the water evaporates and it reduces the heat. So boiling is maxed out at 100 degrees Celsius, and generally it's not going to cook as long. The problem with boiling, and actually this is one advantage that air frying has. The problem with boiling is if you're taking a vegetable that has lots of vitamins and minerals that are water soluble, so a lot of vitamins and minerals dissolve in water. So if you put all your peas or all your carrots in a big vat of water, that water is going to start to absorb those vitamins and minerals. And assuming you're then going to tip the water away, you're then not going to get those vitamins and minerals. Now, if you turn that water into gravy, then fine, you're still going to get the vitamins. But if you just chuck the water away, you're not going to get the vitamins. So boiling is good that it's a lower heat. It doesn't use oil, but you're absorbing some of the nutrients. And that's why microwaving and steaming is much better, because it's a lower temperature and it's for much less time generally. The one caveat with microwaving, which would be definitely the top of the chain there, microwave would be on top. The only problem with microwaving is because it doesn't always cook food evenly, you can end up with hot spots within the food. So some areas of the food end up cooking much hotter, which is a problem not just because of the glycemic index, but also because of compounds that can produce. It can produce compounds within the food that are not as good for you, whereas steaming tends to cook food more gradually throughout. All right, so air frying, definitely better than deep fat frying. Just be aware that it's not as good as microwaving or steaming, all right? It's a scale. I'm not saying you should never air fry your food again or never grill things again. I'm just saying be aware of how it affects the food, all right? And I'm not saying you shouldn't deep fry or roast your food either. Just need to be aware of how that affects it. Okay, free sugar. This is really important because this is when we get to right down to that red end, or right up to that red end of the scale. So high glycemic index. That takes us on to sugar. There's different types of sugar. We have free sugar and intrinsic sugar. Free sugar is the sugar that is added to food or extracted from food. When food comes naturally in things like fruit, it contains, actually, let's do this the other way around. So let's look at intrinsic sugar first. Intrinsic sugar is the sugar that is naturally found inside fruit and vegetables and even milk, but it has fiber in it or protein in it that slows down the absorption of that sugar. All right, so milk has a lot of protein, which slows down the absorption of the sugars. Fruit and vegetables have a lot of fiber, which slows down the absorption of those sugars. So yes, fruit can be high in sugar. And you'll hear, this is another problem with a lot of influencers, is they'll say sugar's bad for you, fruit's high in sugar, don't eat fruit. Very misleading, because fruit also contains a huge amount of vitamins and minerals, a huge amount of fiber, which is very beneficial for you. So actually eating fruit and vegetables is very good for you. And yes, it does contain sugar, but because it's intrinsic sugar, it doesn't suddenly rush into your bloodstream the same way free sugar does. So bringing us on to free sugar. Free sugar is the opposite. That is sugar that isn't contained within fiber. It's sugar that doesn't come with lots of protein attached. It's sugar that gets into your bloodstream very quickly. We're talking about things like soda, candy, syrups, even some sauces. It's things where the sugar has been added to the food, but also sugar where it's been extracted from the food. So if we look at fruit juice, again, very high in vitamins and minerals, but you do just need to be aware that because the fiber has been removed, it is going to get into your bloodstream much quicker. So I'm not going to villainize fruit juice. If it's the only way you get any vitamin C in your diet, then great, but you would be much better off getting your vitamins from the whole fruit rather than just the juice, all right? So the WHO, the World Health Organization, recommends getting a maximum of 30 grams of free sugar per day. So it says a cola there. Yeah, as we know, Coca-Cola contains those 30 grams just in one can. So if you have one can of soda, you've probably already hit your free sugar limit for the day. Okay, so fiber. Why is fiber your secret weapon? We've already talked about it a little bit there. It controls blood sugar absorption. It lowers your LDL cholesterol. It's also worth knowing that 28% of bowel cancers are related to low fiber intake. Also, fiber contains 0 calories, but it still adds bulk to your food. So if you constantly feel hungry because there's not much food in your stomach, it's probably partly down to not getting enough fiber. Fiber will swell up in your stomach, make you feel full without adding calories. It also feeds your gut microbiome. There's more and more research and understanding coming out around your microgut biome and how it affects your health. Worth knowing as well that serotonin, which is your main happy hormone, so serotonin that's related to the feelings of positivity, serotonin is made in your gut. So if you've got an unhealthy gut, that can be a part of why you may be suffering from low mood or depression. So keeping a happy gut with lots of fiber can help keep a happy you. And just a 10-gram rise in fiber can reduce your risk of colorectal cancers by 10%. So a big correlation there. Does anyone know how much fiber the average Brit gets in a day? So jump in on the group chat. We know now that our target is 30 grams of fiber per day, or 14 grams per kilogram of body weight. Sorry, per 1,000 calories, 14 grams per 1,000 calories. Good answers from Rachel and Janelle. Good answer from Bex and Wendy. So you're all in the right ballpark. We are getting roughly half the amount we should get. I don't think I've got a slide on it. No. In the UK, we get about 17 to 18 grams on average of fiber per day. In the US, it's slightly lower. It's more like 16 grams. But yeah, you're all in the right ballpark. We're getting barely half of the fiber that we should be getting. And as you can see, fiber has all these important roles in our health. It doesn't cost us any calories, so get more fiber. Obviously, fiber comes from vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fruits, oats, nuts, seeds. Notice that nothing on that list contains the mention of any animal products, and that is because fiber only comes from plant sources. Fiber is only found in vegetables, legumes, grains, seeds, nuts, plant-based sources of food. That is the only place you can get fiber. Animal protein doesn't contain any fiber. And obviously, we keep hearing you need to eat more protein in order to maintain your muscle mass. Also, protein helps make you feel more full, which we'll talk about in a second. So yes, we do need more protein. We need to eat as much protein as we can in order to help us with weight loss or in order to help with satiety or muscle repair. But the problem is a lot of us get the majority of our protein from animal sources: meat, fish, dairy, eggs. Brilliant sources of protein. You can't get away from that fact that those things are excellent sources of protein. But because they contain 0 fiber, if you are trying to get more and more protein in your diet, the chances are you're getting less and less fiber in your diet. And as we've already seen, most of us are not getting enough fiber. Most of us are getting enough protein. The majority of us get at least 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, which is the minimum. Most of us are getting at least that, but most of us aren't getting enough fiber. So the solution there is we need to make sure we're getting more of our protein from plant sources as well. So that's looking at things like tofu and tempeh and edamames and chickpeas and lentils. Who can remember the last time they had some beans or some lentils or some chickpeas? For most people, it was over a week ago. For some people, over a month ago. But most people can remember the last time they had some chicken or some red meat. So we need to make sure we're getting a good mix of protein sources into our diet and not just focusing on animal-based protein. I am a vegetarian and vegan. Yes, I have skin in the game on this one, but most importantly, I just care about people's health. And so this doesn't come from any kind of bias. It just comes from the science. So I mentioned about satiety and how protein helps to make you feel fuller. So if we look at the satiety versus calorie density, obviously, we've already looked at the calorie density of those different foods, but we haven't really looked at how much they fill you up as well. Fiber helps fill you up a lot. It's very good for satiety because it fills up your gut, it swells up in your gut and has basically 0 calories. So fiber is great for your satiety without costing you any calories. Protein, also great for your satiety. It makes you feel full. It's not particularly calorie dense. It's 4 grams per calorie, as we mentioned earlier. Getting more protein is another great way to improve your satiety. So if you are in a calorie deficit because you're trying to lose weight and you don't want to feel hungry all the time, get more fiber, get more protein. And as we just mentioned in the previous slide, that is going to take a little bit of balancing to make sure that your protein doesn't undermine your fiber and your fiber doesn't undermine your protein. So you're going to need to be smart about it. But more fiber, more protein, it's going to help you feel full. It's going to stop you feel hungry all the time. Fats, also not bad for satiety. Eating fat can help make you feel full, but it's very calorie dense. So we need fats. We need it for our hormones and our nerve function and absorbing certain vitamins, minerals. We need it, but you just have to be aware eating a lot of fat will quickly increase the amount of calories you're consuming. So you need to be smart about it. And fortunately, it will help to make you fill up. Complex carbohydrates, because they contain a lot of fiber, complex carbohydrates can also help with satiety, and they don't contain as much calorie density. You just need to be aware that all carbohydrates, except for fiber, eventually turn into sugar within the bloodstream. So if you are eating a lot of carbohydrates, you need to make sure that you are also reasonably active. Otherwise, your body will eventually end up storing, once you've used up your glycogen storage, your body will start to store those carbohydrates as fat if you are getting too much carbohydrates and not burning enough. Simple carbohydrates, so sugar, very low satiety, and also medium calorie density. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, it's not going to fill you up, but it is going to gradually increase your calorie intake over the day. If you're constantly eating more and more sugar, those calories will add up without ever really making you feel full up. It's never really going to satiate you. And then the worst of all is the combination of sugar and fat. Because we're now adding fat into the mix, that is going to really increase the calorie density of it. So you're going to get loads of calories, and the sugar is going to make it addictive. So therefore, you're going to want to eat more and more of it. So when you're combining sugar and fat together, that's where we can end up having issues with rapid weight gain, because you're rapidly putting yourself in a calorie surplus. All right, so quick question on the group chat. Who reckons they could eat 10 bananas in one sitting? Who reckons they could eat 10 bananas in one sitting? That's equivalent to 1,000 calories, by the way. Not me. And that's coming from Janelle, who's an absolute fiber queen now. Janelle's great at getting her fiber and her fruit in. So yeah, most of you say you couldn't eat 10 bananas in one go. That's about 1,000 calories. Now, I forgot to get my other prop, unfortunately. But on the other hand, most people could eat a full bar of dairy milk chocolate. So one of those bars that's about that size. This is actually some weighing scales, because yes, I weigh my food and count my calories as well. So one of those dairy milk bars that's about that size, most people could, in one sitting, smash a bar. They might not feel very good about it. They might feel a bit guilty. Rebecca says, easy, no problem. Same amount of calories as 10 bananas. Obviously, a banana has fiber in it. It also doesn't contain much fat. So therefore, the calorie density is much lower. It's going to make you feel full, but you're going to get the same amount of calories. That's where we need to be careful of foods like this pretend bar of dairy milk here, which contains fat and sugar and no fiber. Very easy to get those calories in really quick. You're probably still going to feel hungry afterwards, and then you're going to have a big sugar crash afterwards. And because you're going to send your insulin through the roof, you're probably also going to put yourself in that state where you're not burning fat either. All right. So we've talked about calorie balance, macros, glycemic index, cooking methods, sugar, free and intrinsic, fiber, satiety, protein fiber paradox. I haven't got slides on these next ones, but I'm going to really quickly cover them. Food processing effects. We talk a lot about processed food. Yes, processed food can be a big problem. Often when we process foods, we extract the fiber away. We take the fiber away, and so that reduces the satiety and increases the calorie density. So you think about things like white bread or pastries where they've removed the fiber. All of a sudden, the calorie density goes up and the satiety goes down. That's a big problem. Often we add trans fats to foods to make them last longer and taste better. When we add that food, again, when we add the fats, the calorie density goes up. But not all processed foods are necessarily bad. A good example would be baby formula. Women who decide to bottle feed their babies, who decide to give their babies formula milk, for whatever reason they decide to do that. Formula milk is very much a processed food, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad for you or bad for your child just because it's processed. Often that processing involves removing things that aren't so desirable. For example, again, with with milk, with dairy milk taken from cows, often contains a lot of bacteria and unfortunately pus cells. Not to gross anyone out if you're having your dinner right now. Obviously, they don't want that going into your baby formula, so they extract it. And they will often add in vitamins and minerals to make it healthier for your baby. So that is a great example of food processing that is very good. Another good example is plant-based meat substitutes. So if you're someone who is vegetarian or vegan and you're trying to get more protein into your diet, plant-based meats, what they've done there is they've extracted the carbohydrates to make it more protein dense, all right? Because a veggie sausage wouldn't be much of a veggie sausage if it was still 60% carbohydrates. So they extract the carbohydrates to make it mostly protein, just like real meat would be. But they're not adding anything nasty into it. They're not putting any dodgy shit into your veggie burgers. In some cases, there's a bit too much salt. Sometimes there is some hydrogenated fats that would be better if it was unsaturated fats, but often better quality veggie meats are unsaturated fats. Anyway, I digress. Generally, veggie meat substitutes tend to be processed in a way that is positive for you, not negative. And often with veggie meats, you're still getting some fiber as well. All right, liquid calories and alcohol. I'm not going to go into it too much, but just like free sugar, liquid calories typically are going to contain more sugar. And even if they don't contain more sugar, they're still going to be absorbed faster because they're liquid. They get into your system quicker. We digest them and absorb them quicker. Liquid calories are going to have a much bigger effect on your insulin. And alcohol as well. Not going to look too much at alcohol today, but it's worth knowing that alcohol contains 7 calories per gram and doesn't really contain any nutrient benefits. In fact, any amount of alcohol is bad for you. I'm sorry to say it. I drink alcohol myself, not a huge amount, but I'm not here to be your mum or dad and tell you mustn't drink alcohol. We all, or most of us, enjoy some amount of alcohol in our diet, but you have to acknowledge that even a small amount is still detrimental to you, unfortunately. All right. So there is no minimum amount that you can get away with. People used to say 1 glass of red wine a week is good for you. Unfortunately, that's been very much debunked. Avoid alcohol altogether if you are able to. It will benefit you in a number of ways aside from just the calories. That's all I'm going to say on alcohol today. And then moving more and eating better, and muscle as a calorie sink. So I discussed a little bit earlier about muscle. Can anyone tell me why building muscle may be beneficial for a fat loss journey? Can anyone cast their minds back over the last sort of 10, 15 minutes, say why having more muscle may be beneficial, not just for looking better and feeling stronger, but why it might actually be beneficial to help you with your weight loss journey as well? Rebecca says uses more calories. Yeah, certainly building muscle, the process of building muscle, so lifting weights and building muscle uses calories. Also, muscle costs calories just to maintain. So the process of your body maintaining that muscle mass in your body costs calories as well. So the more muscle you have, the higher your resting metabolism will be, your BMR. Janelle says less fat. Yes. So I'm going to give you the answer here. It goes back to the glycogen thing that we discussed earlier. So you can only store glycogen in your liver and in your muscles, and you can't just magically grow a bigger liver, unfortunately. Even if you're drinking lots of alcohol, it's not going to increase the amount of liver mass you have. And because glycogen acts as a buffer, so once our glycogen storage is full, then our body is forced to store any additional sugar as fat instead. So we either burn the sugar, we store it as glycogen, and if we can't do either of those things, then we store it as fat. So the more muscle you have, the more space you have to store glycogen. And the more glycogen you can store, the less your body has to rely on fat storage instead. So build more muscle, store more glycogen, store less fat. All right, that is everything on the K side of things, the knowledge. Don't worry, I will get through the S's a bit quicker. But I feel that knowledge is nutrition intelligence, that knowledge is the foundation of your success, basically. Once you have that knowledge, you can then start to implement it as skills. Skills such as meal planning, knowing how to plan your meal in a way that balances your macros. So you're not getting too much fat, you're not getting too much carbs, you're not getting too much protein, you're getting just the right balance of everything. So you can use that knowledge to then plan your meals and make educated decisions. The skill of grocery shopping without getting caught up in the spin. Every food company is trying to sell you their product. So you've got packaging that has stuff like this. I'm just going to show you. All right, so this packet of granola that has protein as the biggest thing on the packet. And yes, this granola does have more protein than standard granola, but it is still only 17% protein compared to eggs or dairy or tofu or something else that might be as high as 60 or 80 or 90% protein. So yes, it contains more protein than standard granola, but that does not mean it is necessarily a good protein source. It's just a better protein source than other forms of granola. So having that knowledge, then implement the skills of being able to read packaging and recognize what is spin, what is marketing, and what is actually good nutritional advice. And then the 10 times protein trick, I'll talk more about that in a minute. Eating out, being able to make good choices when you're eating out at restaurants, being able to interrogate a menu to see what is going to be a good choice for you. That is a skill as well, something you have to build. Body weight tracking. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. How to take measurements, how to meal prep and cook in batch. Again, this is really important. A skill that will somewhat dictate how well you succeed with your goals is going to come down to your ability to meal prep. Reading nutrition labels, structuring your meals to prevent hunger, so getting more fiber and protein in, getting less sugar in, using AI to recognize calories and macros. So if you're eating out at a restaurant and you're not sure what's in the meal, you can use AI to help you, but that is, again, a skill you need to develop to learn how to do that. Progress photos, often better than scales. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then macro tracking apps. So hands up in the chat, who currently tracks something around their health? Maybe it's the amount of sleep you get. Maybe it's your weight, maybe it's the food that you eat, maybe it's your training. I know many of you are working with me already as clients, so you'll probably feel like you're tracking everything. Let me know, what do you currently track? I'll give you a second because I know some of you are my clients, so you are tracking lots of things. And there's a reason for that. I strongly believe you can't manage what you don't measure. Think of it this way. If you were trying to save up for a new car or trying to save for a house and you never looked at your bank balance, how are you going to make good decisions around how much money you spend if you don't know how much money is in your bank or you don't know how much money you're spending? If you never look at your bank statements, if you never look at your bank balance, you don't know how much money you've got, you don't know how much money you're spending. How are you going to manage your income and your expenditure? How are you going to save up for that new car, save up for that house if you're not looking at the data? I know that sometimes that data can be confronting. Trust me, often when I look at my bank balance right now, it's very confronting, but it's also data that we can then use to make smarter decisions. And it is exactly the same with your nutrition, with your training, with your sleep, with your recovery. All these things help you to make educated decisions so that you can get closer to your goal. Rebecca says she's measuring her calories, her macros, her steps, her sleep. I know that, Bex, you also train frequently and you keep track of your PBs, which is excellent. Anthony says, not me, no worries. That's all right. Hopefully after this, you'll consider tracking some things. Rachel says she tracks her water intake. Janelle says steps as well. Good stuff. As I said, you can only manage what you measure. If you're blind to the data, you can't do anything about it. So how to track your progress. A big one is body weight. If you are trying to lose fat, if you are trying to lose weight, there's no point not weighing yourself. Again, that's like trying to save up for a car without ever looking at your bank balance. I know it can be very confronting to step on a scale and see a number that you don't like the look of, especially when sometimes it goes up and it doesn't go down as fast as we want. It can be very, very confronting for us, but it is data and you need to treat it as data, not drama. And it's also worth understanding that not everything on the scales is fat, right? Only a percentage of the number that you see on the scale is fat. Some of it is water, some of it is muscle, some of it is bone mass. So lots of different things make up the amount of weight that you see on the scales. So it's important to start weighing yourself regularly so that you can recognize, okay, when I have a meal that is high in carbohydrates, my body stores more water, the scale goes up. When I exercise more, my weight goes down. So it's important to recognize the correlations between your behaviors and the data. Progress photos. This is another really good way of measuring your progress because, as I mentioned, the scales only tells you one part of the story. It tells you how much your body weighs, but it doesn't tell you how much of that weight is fat, how much of that weight is muscle. So if you build a whole load of muscle, you might see the scales go up or you might see the scales stay the same, but you might have lost fat, which was the goal all along, right? So taking photos helps you to cut through that noise. If you can see that you're looking less fat, if you can see that you have more muscle definition, then that's going to give you more information, more data to know that things are moving in the right direction. Body measurements is a great way as well. You can measure your waist circumference. Waist circumference, if that is going down, generally when you gain muscle, we don't gain muscle really around our midsection. So even if you pile on a load of muscle, your waist won't really go up. And therefore, if your weight is staying the same, if your weight is staying the same, but your waist circumference is going down, that's a good sign that fat is going down, but muscle is going up, because your waist is getting smaller, but your weight is staying the same. Or even your weight might be going up and your waist is going down, even better. So using body measurements is really helpful as well. And it can also help you track muscle gain. If you measure your biceps, if you measure your quads, if you measure your chest circumference, all those things can give you an idea of your muscle mass going up as well. And then macro tracking. I know this is something my clients are very familiar with and can be pretty boring. It means weighing your foods, measuring your foods, putting it into an app. But again, this is some of the most important data that you can get, whereas the other ones are giving you data around your progress. Tracking your meals gives you data around the input. So weight, body measurements, progress photos gives you data about the output. Macro tracking gives you information about the input. And once you correlate those things, you can start to see what's working and what's not working. So yes, it can be boring, it can be tedious, but it's a skill. It's a really important skill. How to track your progress? Those of you who are working with me as my clients, majority of you will be using my app to track your nutritional data. The great thing about that is not only can you track your data, but I can track it as well. So I can help you manage your nutrition by seeing it at the back end. So you log your data in my app and I can keep an eye on it, making sure things are looking good. If you're not working with me as a client, you can also use apps like MyFitnessPal. I have a bit of a rough relationship with MyFitnessPal. I personally think it's a bit of a shit app, despite the fact that it is probably the most ubiquitous. It is the most common. It's the one that most people have heard of. It's not great, especially if you use the free version. It's full of ads. There's another app called Chronometer, which I think is vastly better. Even the free version, I think, is better than the paid version of MyFitnessPal. Unfortunately, right now, my app doesn't integrate with it. So I know some of my clients use MyFitnessPal, and then their data from MyFitnessPal syncs over to my app, which is great. Unfortunately, Chronometer currently doesn't support that integration, but it is a great app. Again, you can't manage what you don't measure. Okay, so I mentioned about the high protein hack. Some of my clients, you will have already seen these slides. A really good tip if you are looking to increase your protein intake is to understand nutritional labels. When you look at the back of a label, it will tell you how many calories is in it, either by serving or by per 100 grams. It doesn't really matter whether it's by serving or by 100 grams or per packet or whatever. It'll tell you the number of calories. It will also tell you the amount of protein. If you take the amount of protein and you multiply it by 10, then if that number is higher than the calories, so in this case, there's 53 grams of protein and 240 grams. If we multiply that by 10, then we get 530 as the protein value, and that is more than double the calories. So that is a very dense protein source. That's very high in protein. That 88% protein. Look at tofu, 16.5 grams of protein, multiply that by 10 becomes 165, which is higher than the 145 calories. So that's 46% protein. Again, really good protein source. And then we get into things where we need to look out for marketing. Trek bars, they're delicious, great snack on the go. They're often marketed as a high protein snack. 9.2 grams of protein per bar, 227 calories. Multiply that by that 10, we find out that actually a protein flapjack from Trek only has about 16 grams of protein. Again, that's not to say that it's a bad food. If you are having that instead of a Snickers or a Mars bar, then you are obviously moving in the right direction, but you just need to be aware that if you are trying to get all your protein from protein bars and protein flapjacks, you're probably going to end up overshooting your calories before you hit your protein target. All right, so you just have to be aware of marketing spin. I'm not saying don't eat Trek flapjacks. I'm just saying don't try to get all your protein from Trek bars. And then we look at things like protein powders. This is a vegan protein powder, but you can get whey protein or casein or all sorts of other protein powders. 37 grams of protein per serving. per 175 calories. Multiply that and you're looking at 85% protein. So protein powders are one of the best ways to get calories in without increasing your calorie intake. People often worry about protein powders because they're like, oh, it's ultra processed, or it's a supplement. I should be getting my protein from my diet. Protein powders are a perfectly good way to increase your protein intake without increasing your calorie intake too much. They're a very good tool. And if you are someone who struggles with snacking, if you're someone who often finds yourself reaching for a packet of crisps or a biscuit, swap that out for a protein intake, for a protein shake, and you are massively going to improve your dietary outcomes. All right. That's everything I'm going to cover on skills. I think I covered everything I wanted to there. Oh yeah, actually one thing I did want to say is with regards to weighing yourself, because lots of different things affect your body weight, including how much water is in your body and how much poo is in your guts, make sure when you weigh yourself, it is always first thing in the morning, after you've taken a poo, after you've taken a pee, and before you've eaten anything or drunk anything. If you weigh yourself in the morning, if you weigh yourself in the evening, you are going to weigh a lot more than you did in the morning because you've eaten food, you've drunk fluids, and you've probably not had a poo yet. So yeah, if you weigh yourself in the morning when you've had a poo, before you've eaten anything, before you've drunk anything, you're going to get much better readings. And the other thing to remember is that your weight fluctuates because of hormones and how much water you've consumed and how much salt you've consumed, how many carbohydrates you've had, which affects your water retention. So it's important to weigh yourself regularly so that you can look at the trend rather than individual numbers. I know that can be for some people, it can be a bit obsessive to weigh yourself every day. But if you are on a weight loss journey, it can be far more triggering if you only weigh yourself once per week. And if you always weigh yourself on a Sunday, what happens if this Saturday you stayed home, you only ate salads, and you did a massive workout? So this week, when you weigh yourself on your Sunday, you're really light because you've not eaten a whole lot, you've not drunk a whole lot, you've exercised. And then next Saturday, you go out, you drink a load of alcohol, you eat a load of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates rush into your muscles and liver as glycogen. That glycogen draws even more water into your cells. Something good to know about glycogen is for every 1 gram of glycogen, you store an additional 3 grams of water. So glycogen can quickly add to your overall body weight. So this Sunday, you weigh yourself and all of a sudden you're a kilo heavier. And you think, how's that possible? Remember, other things in your body have mass, not just fat. If you weigh yourself every day, you can look at those trends. You can see that it goes up and down, up and down. And as long as it's going up and down, but trending downwards, that's what matters. All right. So weigh yourself frequently and weigh yourself under the same conditions each time. All right. That's skills. Systems. This is where it all either succeeds or fails. You've got the knowledge, you've developed the skills, but you need the systems to keep those in place. On the group chat, who has had the experience of feeling really motivated? By the way, I'm aware that we've gone over on time here, so I do apologize if you only had 90 minutes available. We're probably going to hit 2 hours, but you can always catch up on the recording later. So on the group chat, let me know who has had the experience of feeling really motivated when they start a fitness journey. Maybe you feel, yeah, this is the year I'm going to get the bikini body, or this is the year that I'm going to finally feel confident with my shirt off. Rachel, Rebecca, Janelle, who has felt really motivated when they've gone into a fitness journey? Janelle's felt that. Rebecca's felt that. Okay. Give me a yes or a no. Who has also had the experience of after a few weeks or a month feeling like, oh, fuck it, I can't be bothered with this anymore. I'd rather just be fat for the rest of my life. It feels like too much effort. Yeah, you've had that experience as well? Yeah, so we've felt that experience of motivation being really high, and then we felt that experience of the motivation dropping off. Motivation never lasts. I'm sorry to say it, team. If you are relying on motivation to get you to your goal, you're going to be waiting a long time to succeed. Motivation doesn't last. What lasts is momentum. You've got to build that momentum, and you do that by building systems. When that motivation is high at the start, you have got to start making things a routine. You've got to start making things a habit. You've got to start making things a non-negotiable. Once you have those routines and habits in place, it doesn't matter if your motivation drops off. It is now a routine. It is a non-negotiable. You do it anyway. Whether you want to or not, you do it. You've got to stop relying on motivation. You've got to start making promises to yourself. You've got to start locking things in as a non-negotiable. Once you have those systems, those routines, you will do those things regardless of whether you feel motivated or not. And then here's the good news. You start to see the results and the motivation comes back. When you see the number going down on the scales, when you see your abs starting to come through, when you see a little bit of a tricep pop, when you see all of a sudden you can deadlift 90 kilograms, when you see all of a sudden you can do your first pull-ups or run your first 10K, your motivation spikes. Who on the chat has had that experience of achieving something and feeling like, actually, you know what, fuck it, I can do this. I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to make this happen, because you've seen the results are working. You've seen those systems. You've seen that weighing your food and logging your macros every day, it's actually doing something. You've seen that turning up to the gym every day is actually doing something. Janelle's had it. Rachel's had it. I know Rebecca's had it. Thanks very much, Rebecca. Says more often lately. Thanks to you. Thanks very much, Bex. So yeah, once you start to see those results, the motivation comes back. Again, it may not last forever. You may have to wait until the next little accomplishment comes through to get that next rush of dopamine. Again, dopamine, remember, it is related to doing hard things and feeling rewarded. So dopamine is that thing related to addiction. So if you do the hard things, you get the rewards, you get the dopamine, you start to feel more addicted to that process. Systems, meal prep. We said it is a skill. It is also a system. You've got to do that meal prep regularly. You've got to make a time. Maybe it's every Sunday. Maybe every Sunday you do your meal prep and then you have the food in place. Don't let your meals come down to what you eat, having decision fatigue. If every time you want to eat, you've got to decide what you're going to eat, bad news. You're going to get pretty tired of it pretty quick. Meal prep so that you don't feel you're constantly having to decide. Eat slowly. I would encourage you, if you live with friends, if you live with family, eat with them so that you can have a conversation over your meals. Unless you've got very bad manners, you probably don't eat with your mouth full. So when you're having a conversation with a friend, who's ever been on a date and realized your date is talking so much that they haven't eaten any of their food and you've finished yours? I'm normally that person because I talk too much. So yeah, if you have conversations over your meals, you slow down your food, you have time for the satiety hormones, the GLP-1, the leptin, the hormones that make you feel full. You have time for those hormones to release and stop you feeling hungry. So you're less likely to go back for seconds, or you're more likely to even stop eating when you feel full. I personally struggle to stop eating. I eat whatever's on my plate, regardless of how full I am. That's a skill I've got to work on. Smaller plates. Serve your food in smaller plates, smaller bowls, so that you have less food there. Because if, like me, you always finish what's on your plate, it's probably a good idea to have less food on your plate in the first place. So use a smaller bowl. Handling social pressure with a plan is a really important system to put in place. If you are surrounded by other people that eat too much or drink too much, then it may be worth having a discussion with them, not to shame about them, but just saying, look, this is the journey that I am on right now. Please help me with my goals, help me with my journeys. Please don't encourage me to eat things I don't want to eat or drink when I don't want to drink. Please just help me with this goal. I'd be really appreciative of your help here. Or avoid those social scenarios if you can. Make your excuses or blame the fact that you've got a coach if you've got one. You can say, oh, I would love to eat that, or I'd love to come out for a drink with you, but my coach will kill me. All right? Just blame it on someone else if you have to. That's what you pay me for. So handle social pressure with a plan. Don't just leave it to the moment where you're then under social peer pressure and all of a sudden you're caving in. Don't manage your stress with food. If you are someone that gets stressed and you reach for the candy, one of my amazing clients, Dorothea, she used to eat a huge amount of candy and it was her stress response. She, over the last 2 months working in the program, has only had candy twice when she used to eat it every day, because she's aware that it was a crutch that she was relying on to help with stress. She now uses breathing techniques, going for walks, training, lots of other methods to help manage her stress. Another one that I've forgotten to put on here is sleep. If you're not sleeping enough, you will crave high energy foods because you feel low on energy because you've not slept. So you'll crave sugar, you'll crave fat because your body thinks that's going to give it energy. So don't put yourself in a scenario where you are trying to replace sleep with food. Avoid liquid calories. Delete your takeaway apps. If you are having to download Uber Eats again in order to get food, it's that barrier. Of course, you can delete the app, you can always reinstall it, but it's that barrier that rather than just opening the app and then having all the advertising flashing in your face, you are now having to make that decision. do I really want to download that app again? Do I really want to put myself back in that temptation? So delete the takeaway apps. It's creating that environment that's going to benefit you. Make your goals known to others. Again, similar to the social pressure thing, make sure your friends and family know your goals. And then environment. This is a really important one. Control your environment. This is the biggest part of your systems, is control your environment at home, control your environment when you're shopping, control your environment at work. Serve your food in the kitchen. Don't bring your pots and pans to the dining table and then serve yourself at the table, because chances are you'll keep adding more and more to your plate. Serve your food on a small plate in the kitchen, bring it through to the dining room. And then again, it's creating that barrier. If you want to have seconds, you have to go back to the kitchen to serve more. It's that barrier that's going to make you stop and think. Remove junk food from the house. If you know that having biscuits and crisps is your downfall, don't have them in the house. And that brings me on to another one, is don't shop when you're hungry. If you go shopping when you are hungry, chances are you're going to buy crisps, you're going to buy biscuits, you're going to buy those high energy foods that you are craving because you're hungry. You're going to bring them back. Now they're in the house, you think, I've got them now. I'm not going to waste the money. I'm not going to waste the food. Food waste is a problem, so I'm going to eat them, but I'll just never buy them again. Okay, you say that now, but if you go shopping next time when you're hungry, you'll probably buy them again. Don't have them in the house. What you should do is have healthy snack options available on display, so that when that craving hits you, it's much easier to grab a banana or an apple than grab a packet of crisps. Use meal prep, slow down, eat at the table. When you're shopping, plan your meals before you go. Make a list of the meals that you are going to prepare for yourself throughout the meal. Maybe you have a meal plan within the app. You can have a look through, decide which meals you like the look of, or which meals you despise the look of the least, Rebecca, and then decide what you're going to cook for the week, and go to the shop with a ingredients list. Good news is, again, if you use my app, you can use the meal plan and it will generate a shopping list for you. Just hit the shopping button, it'll tell you what you need to buy. And then just stick to that list. Don't buy anything else. Read the labels. When you're at work, bring your meal prep to work. Don't have snacks at your desk. Make your goals known to your colleagues so they can help you, and go for a walk after lunch. If you're going to spend 9 hours of your day sat at a desk, it's probably a good idea to try and get some steps in after your lunch. All right, implementation. I know that we're very much over on time, so I'm going to get through this as fast as we can. Your current habits create your current body. New habits create your new body. It's no good wanting a new body but being determined to keep your same habits. Nothing changes if nothing changes. You can't expect a different outcome from the same input. You've got to start changing your behaviors. Have systems in place, because on those days where you don't reach your goals, as long as you have your systems, so your non-negotiables, you will always fall back to your systems. You can't reach as high as perfection, you can't reach as high as your goals, you will at least fall down as far as your systems. So have your systems in place as a safety net. Consistency over perfection. The best diet is the one you can repeat next week, with a little caveat. Obviously, I think most of us could happily eat donuts next week. You need to find a diet that is a right balance between achieving the nutrients that you need without being so restrictive that you fall off the wagon next week. I don't like the term fall off the wagon. I'll explain in a minute why. If you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So make sure you have those systems in place, because if you don't prepare, then you are more likely to fail. All right, the reason I don't like the terms fall off the wagon or gone off the rails is because when you fall off the rails, firstly, it's a disaster. It implies there's no coming back. You've got to wait for a crew to come and pick you up with a forklift truck and take you to the tip. When you fall off the rails, it suggests there's no coming back. That's never the case with weight loss or with a fitness journey. You can always get things back in the right direction. But also the problem with the term falling off the wagons or going off the rails is it implies that the journey was passive. It implies that if you keep moving forwards, you're going to get to the goal no matter what, because you're on rails. It implies that you're on the wagon. Someone else is carrying you to your destination. That is not the case. Even if you are working with a coach like me, I'm not carrying you to your destination. I've not got you on a wagon and I'm going to deliver you to your weight loss goals in 6 months or a year's time. It's not the case. You are in the driving seat. You are driving. You are not on a wagon. You are not in a train. You are driving this thing. You're moving it in the direction you want. Every now and then, you might go for a little bit of an off-road. You might go for a bit of a detour. You might find yourself taking the scenic route when you go out for a big weekend. You end up having a bit of a blowout, drinking too much, eating too much. that's fine. You can steer yourself back onto the highway and get yourself back in the right direction. You are in control. What determines your success is not whether you stay on the road or not. It's how quickly you can get yourself back on the road when you steer off of it. So remember, you are in the driving seat. You are not on rails. If you drive off track for a bit, if you drive off road, drive yourself back on as quickly as possible. I know, Janelle, recently you had a bit of a struggle. You did an incredible job of wrestling your mindset back into the right place. And within a few days, you're back succeeding again. So you always have control of this. It's just how quickly you get things back in control. Core principles then, what I want you to take away from this. Fix the calorie deficit paradox. Don't just eat less, fix the food quality. Eating poor food, but just eating less of it to get a calorie deficit is just putting you in a nutrient deficit. Stop the eat what you love trap. You will hear influencers talking about it all the time. Eat what you want and still lose weight. Sure, you can eat what you want and lose weight if you eat less of that stuff. But chances are, if you're still eating the same shit, you're just going to end up in a nutrient deficit and end up going off track later down the road. Build muscle for a bigger buffer. We've talked about glycogen. We've talked about how muscle improves your energy expenditure. Build more muscle. Avoid free sugar. We've mentioned free sugar doesn't really serve you in any way. So cut it from your diet as much as you can. The only exception is if you are in endurance sport or intense exercise. Free sugar can give you energy when you need it really quickly. But if you're not exercising, if you're not doing an endurance activity, you don't need sugar. Your slow burning carbohydrates can give you the energy you want. If you do eat sugar, burn it. If you're going to have some free sugar, do it before or during exercise. Don't have it when you're sat on the couch at night and it's just going to spike your insulin and put you in that high insulin state. Walk after eating. That's going to help bring your insulin down. It's going to allow your body to burn some of that energy rather than it just potentially turning into fat. Get your fiber up for all the reasons we talked about. Get your protein up. Don't drink your calories for the same reason you don't want to be eating too much sugar. Prepare your meals in advance. Do meal prep so that you are not relying on or you're not subject to decision fatigue. Don't shop when you're hungry. Have a plan when you do go shopping, and cook smarter. So try not to be frying everything. Try not to be cooking everything in oil. Try to be cooking things by steaming and microwaving as much as possible. And if all of this feels like a lot to implement, I know that those of you who are on the call right now are already working with me, but for those of you catching up on demand later, if this feels like a lot to implement on your own, that's completely normal. We've talked about a whole bunch of things today, which is a lot to try and do all on your own. That's where I can help. So if you are interested in working together, there's been that QR code throughout this presentation. You can scan that and it'll take you through to an application form where you can contact me. When you work with me, we manage your nutrition, your training, your behaviors and your habits. I give you the accountability as well as the rest of the team. You're part of a community of members that all support each other. And also we do these weekly masterclasses. They're not normally 2 hours long. They're normally less than an hour, but weekly masterclasses to help you build that knowledge. And I'm really pleased to see so many of you have that knowledge baked in. It's all done through my app. So you have access to your training, your nutrition, those meal plans that Rebecca loves so much. We've got the community chat where we're celebrating each other's birthdays and all sorts. And you end up, actually, here you go, moment to embarrass Rachel. So Rachel started working with me last year. Within 8 months, she'd lost 17 kilograms in 8 months, ran her first 10K, completed a high rocks, achieved her first 3 pull-ups. This Saturday, she's going to do her first sub-hour 10K. So Rachel is now doing her second 10K and she's looking to beat the hour mark, which I'm very confident you will. And now, having lost all the weight, Rachel is now actually looking to put weight on, believe it or not. Rachel now wants to build muscle. So she's now so content with the weight loss that she achieved through her hard work. She's now wanting to start to build some weight in the form of muscle. She wanted to build her bum. Love that. And Rach sent me a video a little while back from the year before, showing before she'd lost the weight. And she's like, this is insane. I've really transformed myself. So sometimes it does take looking back at those photos to really see how far you've come. We've got Janelle. Janelle suffers from polycystic ovary syndrome, which due to that, but also due to being overweight, Janelle hadn't had a period for 13 years. And then last year, Janelle, through her amazing transformation with her lifestyle, with her diet, with her training, got her period back last year for the first time in 13 years. I hope you don't mind me sharing that, Janelle. Incredible testament to the improvements in her health. She lifts weights every day. She prepares her meals every day. She's eating more fiber than I've ever seen. She's shooting to get under 100 kilograms by the summer, which she's definitely going to achieve. And she wants to complete a high rocks next year. We've got Jack. Jack has lost 10 kilograms of weight. I say 10 kilograms of fat. I actually think Jack has lost more than 10 kilograms of fat, but because he's gained muscle as well, his total weight loss is 10 kilograms, but I think actually he's lost more fat and gained some muscle as well. Incredible transformation in his physique. Jack is someone who loves to socialize. He still enjoys a drink. He still enjoys some high calorie meals, but he's now learnt tactics and strategies to be able to enjoy those things while still being in a calorie deficit. He uses intermittent fasting. I've said there are some problems with intermittent fasting, but Jack also now understands the importance of protein and fiber. Jack is a vegetarian, just Rebecca and myself, so getting that protein in can be challenging. He's now learning how to do that, and he manages his social life with his weight loss. So I know most of you who are on the call right now are already working with me, but if you are catching us up on demand and this sounds like something you want a little slice of, you can scan that QR code or head to alifits.com/inquire, and you can fill in a short form. It's about 4 questions to get in touch. And hopefully through this masterclass, I'm sorry that we've overrun by 35 minutes, but hopefully you've learned that fat loss isn't just about eating less. It's about building the knowledge, the skills, the systems, and the muscle to maintain those results so that eating right becomes easy and sustainable. Thanks very much for your time, team, and sorry for overrunning so much. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Instagram at alifits.fitness. I know many of you already found me through that channel already. So at alifits.fitness on Instagram, or head to alifits.com. You can contact me through that, or use alifits.com/inquire if you want to get in contact. And then also there's alifits.com/calculator if you want to use that calorie macro calculator. Thanks so much, team. I know it's getting late for you in the UK now, so we'll sign off there, but have a fantastic evening and I look forward to chatting to you very soon. See you later, team.